Oelzah, how are you?
Hi, Pling. I'm well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
I am well. So I shared that article I saw online by Bloomberg. What are your thoughts around that? Just the concept of just making it a norm in the workplace for employees to express themselves to their superiors and just requesting a mental health time off. And I wonder what the workings of that would look like.
Yeah. So, I mean, with everything starts with a conversation, right? And it's certainly around employees using their voices. But Puling, an employee can use their voice, but do they have the conditions present in the environment for things to actually shift?
Mm.
For sure, we all feel like we need more leave, and certainly, rest is productive, is my personal belief. But I still believe that the conversation is to shift from still looking at the symptoms to shifting to the causes. And so we can introduce menstrual leave, we can introduce, a workplace well-being leave or mental health leave and all
Mm-hmm.
of that, but we still wouldn't be addressing what's really at play. And I think that's the conversation that I'd like to have today.
And I'd want us to actually, let's go there. Let's get into the nitty gritties.
Great. So, I mean, well-being is a really important conversation in the workplace today because, as you said, it's not a side conversation anymore. It's not a side dish. It is the main meal. Organizations globally are losing billions to absenteeism, presenteeism, burnout. And literally, organizations cannot afford to not pay attention to this anymore. So it's not a soft conversation as people will have it. It's not just about the ooey gooey kumbaya kind of things. It is now about, whether the organization itself is able to be sustainable into the future. Many organizations subscribe to the thinking that the customer is the most important part of the value chain. Well, the truth of the matter is how your customers are engaged by your employees in their state, whether it is well or unwell, is the most important part of the value chain because attracting customers is not necessarily what we want to do. We
Mm.
want to be able to retain them. And how we do that is through our employee base. And if our employees themselves, if, for example, in a call center, you want someone to display empathy while you're speaking to someone, how is it that they can be empathetic when they truly don't experience this themselves in the workplace? So that's more for me where the conversation needs to start going to the strategic side of well-being in organizations.
Mm. You spoke about something that it's constantly conversational throughout. It's never out of season. Burnout. It could be mid-year. It could be at the end of the year. It could be at the beginning of the year. It's such a constant, this burnout. But I believe this multi-faceted factors that play into one's burnout. And it could be the workplace itself that will drive one to burnout, and it could also be the personal matters. But can toxic leadership also contribute to burnout in the workplace?
Absolutely. I want to start off just by framing this discussion a little bit, and maybe I might say one or two unpopular things, but I think it's important for me to say it, okay? So, a lot of the time, as a start, as employees, and I'm an employee myself, I'm also a leader and I'm an employee, I lead and I follow interchangeably. And so, when I'm speaking about myself as an employee as well. Oftentimes what we do is we place the burden on our own burnout on the organization, but the unpopular thing is that we want the organization or someone else to do something about it. But the truth is the biggest contributor to our own burnout is the lack of individual accountability, the lack of
Mm,
boundaries and dealing with your own
mm,
fears,
mm,
your own feelings of inadequacy that lead you to
mm,
working into the night, your own ego feeding behavior around wanting that promotion and how you think you can move forward. We blame work when we don't spend enough time with our families. We blame our leaders. We blame everyone but ourselves. So for me, it's about learning to know yourself. It's learning to know your own
mm,
capacity, building your own resilience and maturity to deal with something that you don't really have much control of as an individual. And so this is what I really admire about the Gen Z generation. They place their own well-being at the top of their priority list, and so should we all. Right?
Mm.
So that's the base of the conversation for me, is how are we as employees investing in ourselves to remain buoyant in a storm that in an ocean that is storming. Okay. The
Mm.
second part of that is to your point around leadership, and specifically around toxic leadership. Now, I recently wrote an article on LinkedIn about understanding the persistence of toxic leadership, even though business schools all over the world or organizations, different kinds of people are talking about toxic leadership and how this is not conducive to the future of work. So, toxic leadership, yes, it erodes trust in an organization, psychological safety, and this leads to the increased mental health issues that we are now seeing, the disengagement and the voluntary turnover, and sometimes even involuntary when people can't deal with it anymore. So the cost of this is not just human, it is financial to the organizations, high turnover rates, litigation in some cases, and reputational damage, slowly sort of eroding the organizational brand and their strategy. And so, yes, there's toxic leadership, and that comes with its own thing. And a lot of the time, our boards are behind our toxic leaders who push the short term results. One of my mentors used to call it quarteritis. All we want to see is results quarter to quarter, no matter what. And
Mm.
so, this kind of mentality with our leaders, and also that high self interest that our leaders have around what bonuses they're trying to push for themselves, etc., what other ego feeding types of behaviors there are in the organization. So, those things we do need to guard from an organizational development perspective. We need to guard our leadership, who gets in, who gets to stay, who gets to remain. Um, and a lot of the time people talk about, all the different leadership development programs we send people to, but we go ahead and we do that, and people come back, they're changed on the inside, but the environment, the culture, the toxic leaders don't allow people to live that new behaviors of the future.
Mm.
So leadership is definitely something, as in organizations we do need to pay attention to, but then there's also the employees themselves. It's two sides of the coin that needs to take
Mm.
accountability for themselves and put that boundaries in place that they need to be okay.
Hmm. So, what is it about the Gen Zs? Like, what is it? The times that they are born in that they prioritize themselves more than the millennials, are?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like how these generations form, right? And so a lot of the time we have lots to say about the Gen Zs and about how they show up, etc. And it's because it's conflicting to our own current frame of reference in terms of how we came up through the ranks, how we did
Mm.
things. The world is shifting, access is shifting, access to information is shifting. And so the way they see it now is that, your body is your only home that you really have. The way they see it is that your headspace is more important than any other space that there is. And so their parents, the generation that came before them, they were stuck. They're still stuck. I mean, we are still stuck, in the same way of doing things as we have done for the last 100 years, and accepting that. But it was, it's Luthia Wathiongo, an outstanding African novelist, that said, if you want to know the tomorrow of the people, look at the eyes of the young. So, when we can't see past our own faults, we need to look to the youth to transform and to change things. And so they've come to the understanding through watching us burn out year after year after year, and looking at us going, that's definitely not what I want. And if that's the cost, then I can do things differently.
Mm. So, you speak a lot on the issue of mental health and workplace wellness, and you you also speak about the importance of self-development and investing in developing um, ourselves as individuals. What does that look like? Is it something that I
Mm.
do while in the environment that doesn't really um, synthesize or maybe coincide with where I am, what I'm preparing for, what I'm working towards, or I will have to step aside in order to be able
Yeah.
to be in the right mind frame to change things,
Yeah.
because I believe things change when you change who you are. Also, change has to kind of start with you. You need to know what it looks like, what it feels like, what it is.
Absolutely. It's that old saying of be the change you want to see in the world, right?
Mm.
So, yes, I do speak about self-development specifically in my coaching practice, and when I do my mentorship as well. So, for me, I have a simple philosophy around this. It is know yourself, grow yourself, show yourself. a lot of the time we want to show up, and a lot of the burnout is actually linked to this, that misalignment internally with self. So I want to show up, I want to have all the likes and, all the shares on the socials and, all of that. So we want to show up in a specific way, right? But we're starting at the end with the showing. What we need to do is work it back, because there is no real growing without the knowing. So if I don't know myself, what are my triggers? What is my frame of reference? What is my individual reality? What is my, specifically in the African Ubuntu context, what is my collective reality? What is my responsibility to self, and what is my responsibility to the broader collective? And how does that play out within me? So what do I know? I know what my capacity levels are. I know what I can handle and what I can't handle. I know about my strengths and my development areas. So only once I really get a deep understanding and knowing of self, can I really understand what I need to grow. Because I mean, we are doing courses upon courses, programs upon programs, and we're doing this sort of relentless type of growing, and this, continuous lifelong learning. But we're putting ourselves into a perpetual state of growing, but to what end? So our
Mm.
growth needs to become more intentional in terms of our environment, what is needed now in this current reality where I find myself. And so once I truly know myself, well, then I can grow myself. And then instead of maybe the showing ourselves, it's more of a flow, it's more of a glowing, it's more of a noticing, the people going, actually, that individual is, so resilient through this process of change at work. We're going through this retrenchments, we're going through whatever it is, but this person is able to maturely manage their own internal dynamic, and what they need to grow for themselves to be able to remain buoyant out there. Because, in our current context, around the work situation, it's like, we are moving at the speed of light with regards to technological changes and other changes in the world. And it's almost like, in the workplaces now become like space. And we are the astronauts expected to go up into space and just do what we need to do without anti-gravity training. And so
Mm.
the kind of growth that's required now is slightly different to what we would have required. Like, going on an 18-month or doing your MBA or whatever it is, change is so relentless that we need to prepare the bodies and the mind to be able to go through this space exploration of what is the new world of work at the moment.
Mm. And also, just before we wrap up our chat this afternoon, there's an event that's coming up on the 28th and the 29th that you're going to be is speaking at. Not, I mean, I know I won't be able to make it, and some of us don't usually attend event like that, like these, really. But now that you're here, what are the key takeaways that those that will be attending will be walking away with, so that little now we can get something, even though we won't be able to attend?
I love it. I'm hoping that you guys will go check out Knowledge Resources and try to attend if you can, or if you want, you can check out my website, www.figure8network.com, and you can get in contact with me, and we can certainly talk about that, because I'd love to engage more on the topic. So for me, I'll be sharing is we need to get past this kind of workplace well-being theater. Okay. And what I mean by that is simply ticking boxes around, what makes us look good when we post it. So, handing out the free smoothies and, having a yoga, event at work or something like that. So the traditional wellness is often reactive. What we need to do is start looking at the human sustainability and the regenerative side of things, the proactive side of things. So not asking, how can we get back to work quicker, but how is work worthwhile getting back to? And so,
Mm-hmm.
how do we create that? How do organizations build well being as a strategy? So, as I said earlier, just before this, we need to make that shift, right? So, from the individual to the system, how do we build well being as a strategy in organizational performance? So, if I'm okay, my team is okay, there's less friction there. My teams are not, my culture is not in what we call flight, fright, or freeze mode. Okay, maladaptive stress responses like fight, where there's lots of friction in the organization, there's bullying, there's victimization. That's what fight, that stress response looks like in the organization.
Mm.
We talk about the flight mode, the turnover, the presentism, people escaping. You have a bum on a seat, hands on mice, but people are not present. Okay, so how do we make that shift to making it more sustainable for organizations for the future. How do we invest in our people? How do we build well-being as our organizational strategy, build it into our people value chain? So when we say well-being, from the moment we recruit you, how do we make sure that we take care to maintain your state of thriving in an organization? Because ultimately, we want our people to be corporate elite athletes. But what we're doing is we're exhausting our athletes. I don't know any elite sport where athletes are just going and going and going forever and a day. We even race the racehorses. So this idea that we need to shift, the thinking, the system around how we view well-being, not just as a soft, nice to have, kumbaya, let's do the yoga, let's do all of those things, but how do we build it as a strategy in our organizations to ensure our sustainability?
Hmm. Thank you so much for joining us on First Class Africa. This I actually enjoyed, and you are very the pictures you paint. I think some of us actually have been through it. Because you know what? Let's face it, guys. The workplace is the workplace. Which
Mhm.
one is colorful, la 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 la, breezy? Nothing. And the best we can do is do our best to get through it all. But I'd like to have you in the future because I think this is a conversation that is so multi-layered, and sometimes just equipping whether you are a manager or just simply an employee with tools to navigate the demands of that come with your position, it could possibly help us relate better to one another. I don't know, I think.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. And if I could leave the audience with just, a couple of tips, because not all organizations and leaders have massive budgets to do things. Don't think about doing more. Think about doing less. Don't think about starting. Think about what needs to stop. Stopping something costs nothing. So well-being is your strategy to building this high performance, sustainable high performance business. And if you need help figuring it out, you know where to find me.
All right. Thank you once again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Pauline. Take care, everybody.